Basic reality reframing. So many of the techniques I teach are about creating a new reality, changing reality, and this technique is about reframing an existing reality, an old reality. So with this, initially, reality stays the same, only the observer changes. And this is like a pre-paving to creating a new reality, to first reduce your resistance and increase your appreciation of an existing thing. And the way this works is that you have an issue or a list of issues that you make, and because they're issues, because you see them as problems or blocks or negative things, they stay stuck. And you put these things, this list of negative things, into a new frame by asking the reframing question, which is one sentence only, one question, and that question is, in which context could this be useful? Or in which context could this be good? So I'm going to give you several examples of this. Let's say, for example, that there's a perfectionist and perfectionism really bothers that person. So I'd ask, okay, in which context would perfectionism be useful? You see, everything in the universe is there for a reason. Everything has a purpose. Everything belongs. And that's what this technique is based on. And if they tell me, well, I can't imagine anything, any context in which perfectionism is useful, then as a coach, I have to provide the reframing. But it would be much better if you yourself can provide that reframe and don't require a coach for that. But that's one of my jobs, to reframe for people. So perfectionism might be useful if you were a book editor. Then the quality of perfectionism is great, fantastic. And that's only one example. There could be hundreds. Or let's say you're angry about your messy apartment. Every time you come home, the apartment is messy. So I ask, okay, in which context could a messy apartment be good? And they might say, well, in no context at all. Messy apartments are bad, period. And that's just resistance. And as long as they have this resistance, nothing's going to change, because they're radiating anger. And the more they resist, the more the problem will persist in their mind and around them. So to soften that up, I'd say, well, the messy apartment indicates that your beloved family is home. The children and wife you love so much, or husband you love so much, they're alive and kicking. Somebody's alive and home. If they were all dead, then your apartment would be orderly and clean at all times. In fact, if you were dead, it would be orderly and clean at all times. So are you sure you want cleanness and orderliness at all times, as if nobody were living there? And this softens the person up. He relaxes and he starts associating the messy apartment with love, and makes a new connection in his mind, feels the relief. And what then happens is that as he feels differently, he radiates differently, and what might happen is that his family picks up these new vibrations and they become more orderly and more clean. Another option is that he finally gets the idea to employ somebody to clean up. Another option that might happen is that he no longer minds the messiness. In any case, every time you reduce resistance and see the good side, things change, realities change before you even have to create a new reality. So let's say you hate crowded airports, like I used to. That could be, how could that be useful? Who could use that? Well, the owner of a private jet company could use that to his benefit. One person's problem is another person's profit. You see? It's the same principle. And then you say, well, I hate crowded airports, but I can't afford a private jet company. So I say, okay, how else could you re-contextualize that to feel better about it? I'll tell you what I did. I flew a lot, and I always stood in long, long lines, and it really, really motivated me to improve my lot in life so that I would be able to afford business class, the fast lane, so that I wouldn't have to stand in lines. What motivated me to get there? Well, crowded airports. So I made use of something so-called negative to bring me to something positive, namely to improve my situation. You might say, well, it's so sad that I'm getting divorced. I'm afraid of it. It's shameful. I don't know what the future brings. And I say, okay, in which context might that be good? Might that be useful? And you might say, well, in no context at all, because divorce is a sad thing, isn't it? It's really a bad thing. A sad thing and a bad thing. You made your vows, your promises, and then, despite your best efforts, it doesn't work out. It's a split, a trauma, and your life is never the same again. And they keep talking this way and get more foul-mooded and more sad, and it doesn't help them, because the meaning they ascribe to things determines how they will turn out for them. So if he stays in that state, he's going to have a very lonely and sad life after his or her divorce. So you might say, well, if I consider how nasty my partner was, years of nastiness, if I focus on that side of things, then divorce feels totally liberating, pure freedom, feels good. So you see, even something bad as divorce can be seen in a good light, in a positive light. It can be seen as something new, something fresh, freedom, letting go of something stale and old. You see, and vice versa, of course, staying with a partner, not divorcing, can also be reframed positively. You can also find the good sides of staying. You can find the good sides of going and the good sides of staying. The main point is you feel relief, you feel more able and more energetic regardless of whether you stay or whether you go. So for most people, when their house is burned down, they think their life is over. They think that's it. Everything they worked so hard for is suddenly gone. The house is burned down. And if that's what they think, then their life will be over afterwards, and they will never get back up on their feet. Not because their house burned down, but because of the meaning they ascribed to that, because of how they labeled that. But the house burning down is not a bad thing for everybody, because if you look at it from a more soulful side, from a higher perspective, then it's actually a pretty good opportunity to let go of a lot of old baggage and to find and experience and get something better. And that would be my first thought. I'd say, oh, this is a shame, this is a pity, this is really too bad. I have so many valuables in that house. However, all valuables can also be baggage, and I'm kind of glad that this phase of my life is over. It feels exhilarating, it feels fresh. I can now attract something better into my life. And because I label the event that way, that's exactly how it would go for me. So 5 people watch a house burning down, and each one of them has a different reaction, a different frame, a different context, and they'll experience according to their context. Now, we've seen reframing to reduce resistance, which is very good and gets reality flowing again. But you can also use reframing to reduce desire. Why would you want to reduce desire? Well, you'd want to reduce it to release attachment. So if your attachment is too strong, then you just reframe a little bit and reduce the importance, take the importance out just a little, Not totally. You don't totally drop your desire. You just reduce it a little, because anything you're too attached to, you are a slave to. So, for example, many people are a slave to getting rich, and they say, my biggest and most important thing in life is to get rich. And then I say, well, many people I know and I've helped to get rich, I have helped many people to get rich, they tend to get lazy and complacent. That's the danger, the bad side, the dark side of getting rich. Everything has a bright side and a dark side. And what I've now just done is I've reframed and reduced, taken out the steam just a little bit. So the key question to this method is, in which context would these things be bad? You see, you might say, well, falling in love is the most wonderful thing in the world. And I say, well, it could make you forget all other important things. I've seen that happen a lot. So love is not the only thing. It's one good thing. It's a nice thing. But let's not overdo it. Let's not exaggerate its importance. Or you might say to me, well, I want to feel good all the time. I say, are you sure you want to feel good all the time, or would you prefer feeling good when appropriate to feel good? Do you want to feel good when you see children getting killed, for instance? Or do you want to feel good when it's appropriate and not feel good when there's something wrong? And use your emotions as a navigation system for what's good and what's not good for you. You see, if you feel good all the time, you don't really know what's good for you and what's not good for you. You've lost your navigation system. So these were three typical examples to reframe to reduce desire. However, reframing to reduce resistance is a much more common technique, and I recommend you get proficient in that. First, to summarize, most things are only good or bad because you think they are. Only very, very few things are good, bad, regardless of what you think. I'd say about 90% of things. But even those 10% that are really, really bad, even they can be made use of, you see. They can teach a lesson. So I usually, when really bad things happen, I usually re-contextualize them as lessons. So if I get really sick, for example, I say, okay, that's a lesson. Perhaps it's a lesson that I've been overdoing it. Perhaps that's the message here. And once you get the message, the thing often stops happening. That was an introduction to basic reframing. And the idea being, before creating a new reality, see if you can reframe the old reality. And then if you still need to or still want to, then go ahead and create a new reality. You see what I'm saying? My name is Fred Dodson of www.realitycreation.org. Thank you for listening.